Hi, everybody. This is Justin back with I'm Your Aid Astrology for another weekly update. So, this week I am doing something a little bit different. Normally, when I give my weekly updates, it's very chart heavy with aspects and transits. And not to say that's not the direction we're going this week, but I wanted to present the energies a little different way. And we will be getting into some charts in the middle of today's video, but I really wanted to further emphasize on the educational aspects of my weekly updates, because that is really the intention behind these episodes, is to provide knowledge through empowerment and to identify the stars and how they're affecting you on a personal level and sometimes on a worldly level, and the best way to navigate on a week-over-week basis. But since I'm a progressed Gemini, I wanted to give this in more of a Gemini way, which is kind of high-level bullet points with some education attached to it. So let's begin. So I want to focus this week on the individual planets that are kind of the heavy hitters, kind of driving the energy around this week. And there's several planets that are having a pretty big conversation with one another, and that's the Sun with Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And there are also a few other key players. But I thought it'd be helpful to kind of break the energy down one by one. So first I want to talk about the Sun, because the Sun is a planet that is really stirring things up this week. Think of the Sun as the spotlight at a play, really shining a light on the key actor. And just as a reminder of what the Sun is, it's our soul's identity. It's who we are on the inside. Most of our outward projections to one another is through our mask of our ascendant. For example, most of you that follow me on YouTube, you get to see my Libra. And in some cases, kind of a hybrid personality between my Libra rising and my relocated rising sign, which is in Virgo. So it's kind of charismatic, but deep diving, very granular, especially with the analysis I give here on my channel. However, those of you that know me more on a personal level, it's much easier to identify me as a Taurus. And a very intense Taurus, mind you. I have a stellium of Taurus, four Taurus planets in my 8th house natally. So, that's basically like a closet Scorpio. But anyways, I just wanted to give you an understanding of how that works. But it's your soul's identity brought into physical form. It also represents the father, leadership, authority. It's our will, our drive, our ego. And in this case, in transit, it is the spotlight to the bigger conversation we have going on this week. Another big player this week is Pluto. And I think all of us had a little bit enough of Pluto when it comes to this year. And I'll talk about how the Sun and Pluto interact together. But in general, many have a love-hate with Pluto. It's death, but also it's transformation. It's like one cannot act without the other. It is a deeply psychological planet. This will be our fears, our obsessions, our compulsions, our worry. In the chart, it would represent some of our deepest traumas, insecurities, and our struggle with our power and control. And Jupiter. So Jupiter, as everyone knows, is the great benefic. It is like the Santa Claus of the planets. Typically, we talk about with Jupiter It's positivity. It's luck. It's optimism. It's could even be financial abundance, um, higher wisdom. It's a um, glass half full type of energy. But this week we're going to be talking about it in square, and out of all the planets that are in conflict by a square, um, it's the easiest to navigate. And what it really does when it touches a square, it's over access in something. So let's say Jupiter is in contact with Mercury via square. That is an overreaction. Um, or obsessiveness. Let's say if Jupiter is in a square with Venus, that is kind of overindulging, overeating, emotional eating, um, a lush in some ways, or um, overextends themselves. It could overpromise. So in this conversation with these planets, think of it as over access. And Saturn, um, much like the square, squares are very Saturnian. And what happens when we meet any planet in a square? It's restriction, it's conflict, it's tension, it's delays. It retards things. It depresses the other planet, depending on what planet it touches. Um, it also represents the father and authority, grandfather as well. So, what does the sun and these three planets? How does this conversation play out? Well, when the sun is in square with Pluto, or where those two planets are talking to each other, it's the hidden self. It's the part of you that you don't let anyone else see. You can't trust showing that side of yourself. It hides its pain. It's it has a struggle with power and control. On the more um, intense versions of this, it is suicidal impulses, especially with uh, Chiron and Aries. That kind of makes it a little bit more amplified, as Chiron and Aries is kind of more not suicidal impulses, it's more like suicidal fantasies, like the world is just too hard, and you fantasize about what would it be like to be in heaven, or whatever your version of heaven is, or wanting to retreat from this 3D reality. And the sun with Jupiter, again, it's over access and things. So with everything going on in this square, it's overindulging, overeating. It can become lazy. It lacks motivation. Again, it could be a lush, um, uh, kind of emotional eating to deal with stress. And then Sun Saturn, it's lack of will, drive, lacks confidence. Saturn in a good placement with the Sun is a very disciplined person. When you look at the square, it's basically kind of the opposite. It lacks self-discipline. It's breaks with authority. On a physical level, Sun square Saturn could even mean broken bones. So some of the other key players um, in this astrological climate is Mercury and Chiron. They are in conjunction, and the Uranus and Mars are in a square. So people that have Mercury Chiron, they're very nervous-minded. They deal with a lot of anxiety or stress. These people tend to be very antsy. They shake their legs. They are cigarette smokers, and they do anything they can to kind of deal with that nervous energy. Also, Mercury Mars people are very similar with Mercury Chiron. And when we're talking about all these emotions, what's the you know, the key attribute that would describe all of them is it's toxic thoughts. And we've been dealing with a lot of Mars and Uranus energy. Last week, it was we also had Mars kind of conjunct Saturn, square Uranus. So when that happens, it's a lot of anger when Mars is met with restriction of Saturn. I think a lot of people started kind of airing out their frustrations. It could also be kind of impulsive, but it's also explosive anger and anxiety. So far, it's been not the best combination, to be honest with you. So getting back to the chart of the moment, how does all this kind of play together? And mind you, the sun by the end of the week is going to be in conjunct with Uranus. So, Sun, Uranus people kind of rebel against authority, rebel against the father. So I think what's going on is Mercury, and good news, has finally moved out of Pisces, which is good because that's created this fogginess, especially with Mercury and Neptune. It's a lot of deception, a lot of fake news, a lot of propaganda, lying, deceit, undermining. So Mercury, thank God, is finally out of the neighborhood of Neptune, and it's moved into Aries, which is kind of like good and bad. I think we've had this kind of fogginess, out of body experience where space, time, and consciousness has kind of felt like it's been standing still. Now that Mercury could think a little better in Aries, it has almost like a backlog of information to give, because Mercury and Aries people are they tell it how it is, almost the uncomfortable truth. They're sarcastic, they're abrasive. They say things without thinking. And when you have Mercury and Chiron conjunct in Aries, that could be some very hurtful communication or conversations. And I think what happens is there's going to be that either some very hurtful, abrasive conversations with others. In this case, possibly even, not even possibly, definitely with authority. But it's also bad self-talk. So I was on a walk over the weekend with a dear friend, someone close to me, and they made a statement towards me that maybe I could have taken a little bit of offense to it. Since Mercury was in Aries, I knew people were kind of saying things they didn't mean, or they were think of Mercury in Aries as not having a filter. It's like saying that's what she said type of joke at a very poor time, poor comedic timing, we'll call it. And the person recognized what they said instantly, and then they started to kind of beat themselves up. They were angry with themselves. They were calling themselves names. They were putting themselves down. And I didn't even take offense to it. I let the person express themselves because I didn't want them to feel bad for having those emotions. I think it's all okay to express ourselves and know that, with the energy of the times, you want to build a safe container to share. And then afterwards, I asked, I hope you realize that those statements you made aren't true. So I think there's going to be these very hostile communications, and it's going to be hitting these planets with Mars and Uranus, and it could create explosion of anger. Then when the sun touches Saturn, I think we're after the the onset of these difficult conversations, it's going to bring kind of a depression. It's going to bring some sadness. And I think, with Jupiter there, I think people just want to escape, and maybe escape by, emotional eating, maybe indulging themselves in a few vices, and maybe wanting to escape reality completely. So, what can we do about this? Now, remember, anything that comes to the surface, it's come to the surface for a reason, and it might just be for a season. But we have some planetary aid. We have Venus in Gemini, and then Venus in trine with Mars and Saturn. So here's how I see this playing out is, number one, the best way to alchemize toxic thoughts is mental stimulation and learning something new. And Venus and Gemini love to be in small social groups. They're great at small talk. So if you're dealing with this, align with your like-minded friends. I had an idea to a group of friends, like, hey, why don't 4 or 5 of us get on to a Zoom conference and watch a documentary, and then we could have a virtual bonfire and discuss it afterwards. It was educational documentary, so it was mentally stimulating, Venus, Gemini, in small groups of people, Venus, Gemini. So that's one way to kind of overcome this. My favorite thing to deal with toxic thoughts is learning something new. So over the weekend, I took an extra astrology course. I've been doing one-on-one tutoring as well. I've been doing business coaching, Venus, Gemini. So, fill that dark space with something new and push those cloudy thoughts into, push them outside of yourself. And Venus trine Mars and Saturn it's going to make you really committed to this. I think what is happening is all of our deepest and darkest fears are coming to the surface. We've all been in isolation and having to face ourselves. So it's time for these thoughts to be alchemized and transmuted for transmutation. And Venus and Saturn is going to make you very committed and driven. But also it's going to kind of temper this Mercury and Aries. Is going to give us some maybe emotional discipline with it. So if you're going to have a conversation this week, good or bad, a helpful tool is, before you speak to that person or group, give it up to your higher self and ask yourself, how can I present this information, this conversation, in a way that it will be received with ease, grace, and glory? And once you just give that up to your higher self, spirit will help you find the right words. And I think this is going to kind of help find us some resolution with some of these harder aspects with Mercury and Aries throughout the month. So another part of this is we had the full moon in Libra last week. And this is still in conversation in a lot of ways with the Sun square Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto. And when you talk about Libra, the Libra means the other. And when you look yourself in the mirror, the other is you. And it's a time that we have to face ourselves. Maybe some of these deep, darker thoughts have been monopolizing our consciousness for too long. And in isolation, without removing all the distractions, you could kind of get to the bottom of some things. Again, a great way to counteract this is alchemizing toxic thoughts. We talked about the idea of learning something new with the power of Venus and Gemini in play. This is also a time for shadow work, getting into the body, releasing stuck energy in the body through, that could be Reiki, yoga, I know we are in quarantine, we can't really touch each other. Those of you that need a little bit of a boost, I am a practicing shaman and Reiki master. So if you guys want distance energy, I could do that for a very small cost. And I have a strong assortment of quartz crystals. And what I could do is I charge those and let the energy run till it's no longer needed or warranted. So I'm happy to contribute my energy to the situation. And then also forgiveness. And sometimes when you forgive yourself, it could lead to more possibilities. And sometimes if you've been hurt by other people, the idea of forgiveness is not only for them, you're forgiving them for yourself. Because sometimes when you sit in the energy of resentment, you can't grow. And with, part of this full moon in Libra and this conversation with the sun and the other planets, it's, certain relationships, Libra, are at a culmination point. They either needed to be balanced, healed, or repurposed in some ways. And we talked about the difference between wing clippers and wing fluffers. It's the people that build you up versus the people that tear you down. And maybe some of the individuals that have been tearing you down, maybe this week they have torn you down for the last time. And what I've found in life is once you remove something that isn't for your highest and greatest good, it automatically gets replaced with something better. And I think there's a lot of earth angels waiting in the wings right now. So in the finale of this, I talked about the Pluto-Jupiter conjunction, and I called it 3 waves of awakening. We have this going on now, end of June and end of November. So there's 3 opportunities to do this. And with all of these energies going on right now, it's very easy to get caught in these depressed states, the states of hopelessness. And when I see Pluto and Jupiter together, I see it going 2 ways. Which reality do you want to live in? I think with the nodes shifting into Gemini, I think there's going to be a split of reality. And some of you are going to choose the reality of Pluto, which is fear, your worst nightmares coming true, or Jupiter, where Pluto and Jupiter together are, these are the ultimate manifestors. Fear is our greatest master teacher. It shows us what we no longer want. And I will tell you, once you face your fears, there's incredible rewards on the other side of fear. And anytime I face fear in my life, it's a good sign. It tells me that I'm onto something good. Because when I have subconscious fear about something, I know it's just something getting in the way of what's really important to me. And some of the biggest jobs I've had in my life, my previous life as a marketing person, I had a lot of fear about even taking the job. But you know what? I took the job and it became one of the biggest turning point of my life. And I go back and think about, man, what would I missed out on if I keep falling into fear? So this is a reality split. When you give energy to something, it grows. Are you going to pull fear closer to you, or are you going to pull your dreams, wishes, and desires closer to you? And I'm going to leave you with that. If you guys like this, let me know. Share your thoughts on the comments or comments on my Facebook posts in this regard. It takes me a little more time to give you this weekly astrology update in this way. But if you guys like it and appreciate it, I don't mind putting in the extra legwork for you if you feel it's helpful. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed this week. Thank you again for tuning in to I'm Your Aid Astrology. This is Justin. I'm not your coach. I'm not your guru. I'm not your guide. I'm your aid. I am your angel in disguise. I help you, empower you. Until next week, may you all walk in beauty.